Welcome to Mutual Exchange Radio, a project of the Center for a Stateless Society. I am your host, Zachary Woodman. Joining me today is Vermin Supreme. You might know Vermin as the satirical presidential candidate from the last few election cycles who ran on a platform of free ponies and mandatory toothbrushing. Or you might just know him as that crazy guy with the boot on his head. But this year, he's running a slightly different campaign for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination. Rather than his usual dog and free pony show, he's seriously promoting left libertarian and anarchist ideas such as mutual aid and non-domination to the largely right libertarian audience in the LP. In this interview, we discuss this campaign, as well as his use of humor as a de-escalation tactic at tense protests, his history of activism within anarchist communities, and where he sees himself standing within anarchism ideologically. This was a very interesting and entertaining conversation that was quite different from the sorts we usually have on this show, so I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, here is Vermin Supreme. Hello and welcome to this episode of Mutual Exchange Radio. Today I have the honor of talking to someone who needs no introduction, Vermin Supreme, a current presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Hello, Vermin.
Hello there. How are you?
Excellent. How are you? You surviving this apocalypse?
Yes, I am. I've created a new content outlet every evening around 5:30. I've been live streaming on Facebook about an hour of nature because I live up in beautiful Cape Ann, Massachusetts, and there's a lot of ocean and bodies of water and little streams and things. And I've been spending about a half hour to an hour just sharing some scenery with the people because a lot of people are completely shut off and sealed in and aren't getting out to nature at all. And,
yep, I'm in that boat.
so you're welcome to tune in and watch some nature with me anytime. It's my presidential service, I guess.
Yes, far more wholesome than what most candidates are doing these days.
Yes, I mean anybody can rant and rave and try and whip people up into a frothing frenzy, but no, I'm not about that.
Right. So
unless circumstances warrant that, of course.
Yeah. So we might touch a little bit on some of the COVID stuff later because it might be interesting to get your thoughts on it if you have any, depending on how you feel. I'll edit that part out. Sorry, that was awkward.
No worries.
So, but first I wanted to talk a bit about what exactly you're accomplishing with this campaign. And maybe to foreground that, let's talk about your sort of history of political activism. How did you get into being a presidential candidate?
Well, it has been a long slog, a long, slow climb. It essentially, from what I understand it to be, it's a skill set that I've developed over the past 30 years, utilizing a communication strategy that I've also developed. And essentially, I'm like this highly respected political satirist dude, which is funny because it's true. But it wasn't always that way. And of course, in the late 80s, I was living in Baltimore, Maryland. I was hanging with the art weirdos, used to do bookings and promotions at a couple nightclubs after many years of putting on parties in various locations, including warehouses and parking garages and all sorts of strange locations that we would find. And we would just like throw in too many bands and too many kegs. And I wasn't particularly political back then, or if I was, it was sort of in a sort of a typical way. And that's when I became Vermin Supreme. When I was doing the bookings and promotions, at that time it was all booking agents and all club owners and all promoters were vermin, and I was going to be the Supreme Vermin. And of course, back then it was sort of tail end of punk rock days, and the art weirdo scene being what it was not unusual for somebody to take on a name like that. And of course, at the time, it was it eventually became a very short leap from club owners being vermin to politicians being vermin. But I eventually burnt the fuck out on Baltimore, Maryland, and was plotting my exit. And I had one foot out the door, but yet I was still looking for some reason or something or project that would, that would let me hang out there some more, because rent was cheap, and that will tend to keep me places. And the rent was cheap there, of course. And so I declared that I was running for mayor of Baltimore, Maryland. I thought, I knew a lot of people, and felt that that would be something to do. And that kept me there for, it didn't keep me there at all, quite frankly. Within the next couple months, I was still aching to get out of there. And then my exit rolled on up in the form of the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament, which was a cross country anti nuclear weapons march that went from LA to DC in '87, and it rolled into Baltimore. And when I saw that, what I saw was an amazing mobile city on wheels. It consisted of 5,000 people were on board at that point, and all the equipment that you would imagine was required to move people down the road. There was like several racks of porta potty trucks. There was like giant water tanker trucks. There was a porta potty pumper trucks. There was mechanical repair shop trucks. There was all these school buses that actually functioned as schools because there were so many kids on the march that they had their own school system going on. They had a town hall. They had all these just kitchens. They had like 3 or 4 different kitchens and prep trailers and reefer trailers hauling all the food. And it was really an amazing and impressive and eye-opening event for me because I had read about it a couple of weeks before that in a Mother Jones article, and essentially it made it sound as though it had collapsed in the desert. So when it actually showed up on my doorstep, I was thoroughly surprised and delighted, and essentially went to my local thrift store and bought a clean pair of clothes and bought a crappy sleeping bag and jumped on board this group of people that was marching to DC, and spent about 3 or 4 days getting there. And then there was a weekend of protest and civil disobedience and people throwing their shoes over the White House fence and concerts and all these things. And I met a bunch of anarchists who became my fast friends. I'm still in touch with after all these many years, and they were responsible. The anarchists were specifically responsible for the march continuing, because when it collapsed in the desert of Barstow, California, it was essentially because David Mixner, the guy, the political operative whose vision it was, overextended it financially. He had this vision of this huge white bread march across America with movie screens that the people could watch movies with, and they had their own tents printed up and their own milk crates printed up with their logo on it. And so it collapsed financially. And when it did, all these repo people were coming, the repo men were coming to take the equipment, and the direct action anarchists were preventing that from happening by disabling the equipment and lying down in front of it. And so they saw to it that the march continued. And they were a very big part of this particular march and movement. And they were able to finagle some financing and to purchase some of the equipment. So they bought a porta potty truck rack. I think it had 8 porta potties, kitchen trailer, a prep trailer, and info trailer and a water trailer. And their mission became supporting these mobile demonstrations, community peace marches. And the first one I was on was in Florida, went from Kings Bay, Georgia, where they Trident D5 nukes were being deployed down to Cape Canaveral, where they were testing them. And then we had a big people going back country to try and disrupt the actions there, trying to disrupt the launching tests. And we sat tight for some friends of ours who had been arrested. And so we were personing their little Cape Ann Canaveral Action Community Committee or whatever. And during this time, I started attending these political events, obviously, and also at the same time started attending rainbow gatherings. I'm sure you're familiar with the rainbow gatherings.
A little. Could you refresh?
Okay, essentially they were a temporary autonomous zone. They happen every year. The national or the annual, they try to stay away from the word national, but the annual event is the first weekend of July with a week of setup and a week of breakdown. Imagine, if you will, 4,000 people sitting in concentric circles in a giant meadow in the middle of a national forest. All of a sudden, they are waiting for dinner, and out of the forest comes from 100 different kitchens, people carrying 5-gallon buckets of food down to all these people. And they start serving people, and other people start going around the circle, giving information about all the various workshops that might be occurring that evening or tomorrow, and the talent shows that might be occurring, and just all the sort of entertainment notes and things that are happening. Then the magic hat goes around, and because it's a non-commercial hat, the magic hat collects the money. It's the only place you can throw your money is there, because you can't buy anything, you can't sell anything with it. It's a completely non-commercial event. And so everybody kicks down, and then it goes to the center circle. Banking council counts the money. They announce the amount. Anybody who wants to join the banking council can. It's totally transparent. The kitchen council meets the next day. Representatives in a spokes council, horizontal type fashion, put in their shopping lists. They interface with the supply council, and they get the money from the bank council. Goes, buys the supplies, brings it to the kitchens, and they do it over and over again. So all these people get fed. It's a wonderful thing. And essentially there's 10-20,000 people out in the woods, sometimes more, sometimes less, in a completely leaderless experience where anything that gets done, chopping vegetables, building a kitchen, it's sort of Flintstones meets Gilligan's Island, to workshops, to digging shitters, to tapping the springs, to unrolling the water pipe, to making a functioning water system, to clean up and making it all disappear, and then decompacting the land, and then reseeding the land, and like that. And that's where I learned a lot about anarchism and functioning anarchism, and anarchism in practice and exercise. It is an anarchistic organism, although it does not identify itself as such. But that is where I picked up a lot of my chops and a lot of my skills, because it is such a free place. You can sort of make what you want of it and create what you like. And so for the first several years, I was sort of entertainment high holy, sort of carrying on my stagecraft, and being a stupid clown and trying to entertain people and finding things that I thought were funny, and doing them over and over again just to make people laugh, and like that. And then after several years of that expression of self in that environment, I realized that once again, because we provide all these services for ourselves, I became much more aware of things that would happen that needed some sort of intervention. And I come to find out that yes, we do provide our own security. It's one of the functions, and we have a council, a security council, and we culturally appropriate the Sanskrit word of Shanti Sena, and it means peacekeepers or some such. And I paid more attention to that. So I started bringing in my clowning skills and my humor skills into this crisis intervention arena. And more or less, I mean, let's be frank, it's glorified camp counselor type of shit. And on a good day, it's just people having a disagreement, but sometimes it gets real heavy, as you can imagine, because it is there are no tickets, there's no barriers to entry. It attracts all types of people, good, bad, and ugly, including predators, and people without the best intention. And so we have to deal with that. And of course, because it is such a huge counterculture event, the government, the state, has been actively opposed to it since its beginning. In the early years, they sent out the National Guard, and all these hippies just went around them and gathered. And over the years, there's been permit schemes where the government has tried to tell us we needed permits for more than 75 people gathering. And these have gone up and down to the Supreme Court, and we continue to win. But a lot of times the National Forest Service, which is a subsection of the Department of Agriculture, will have the incident command. They will spend up to $1 million a year on this incident command law enforcement team, specifically to target the rainbow gatherings. And they come out in force. They set up their own cop camp up the road. They patrol the roads up and down. They pull people over. They jack people up. They search people's shit. They make arrests. They come through the gathering. They arrest people for nudity out in the middle of nowhere. They ticket people for, having their dogs off a leash, for, drug, marijuana possession. And so and a lot of times they do it in a really outrageous fashion, and try and create incidences that cause great, crazy movies in the vernacular of the rainbow, where a lot of things have to be done. And so one of the security features that we provide are escorts to these cops. And of course, I'm not referring to sexual escorts. I'm referring to, people, cop blockers, cop watchers, and cop walkers. And so I would spend 8 hours a shift walking with cops and propagandizing cops and warning the hippies that the cops were in their area and making fun of the cops and having fun with the cops.
Making
And
fun of
just
the cops. I'm sure that went over well.
well, once again, it's a blessing that I'm gifted with this random DNA roll with the upbringing or whatever. But I can generally do it in a way that doesn't piss them off too hard. So after doing that, I mean, after building those skill sets, that was when, and of course, I felt very comfortable doing that because I knew my people were watching my back. And, I've been arrested a few times at demonstrations, but I've been arrested many more times at the rainbow gatherings. And it's generally me jumping into their shit. When I get arrested there, it's generally because I'm interfering on behalf of another situation that's going on as a distraction. And more often than not, they run me through the paces and, want to see the ID and want to know what my name is and don't believe what my name is and blah, 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 blah. And then they eventually cuff me and drive me down the road a quarter mile and kick me out again. So I was able to take those skills out into riot world. And of course, in demonstration situations, you have your protesters and you have your line of cops, and in between, there's this no person's land, which is essentially a vacuum where anything can and often does occur. It could be like a wingnut protester, like totally flying through and jumping into the cop's face too hard or something, or it could be the cops fucking taking a cheap shot with their pepper spray or whatever, and things sort of fall apart from there. And so I discovered that I could step into that vacuum and seize that situation with my bullhorn and calm voice and sensibleness, but humor. And so a lot of things that I like to do in that situations that I will read to the cops from riot control manuals, just so that I sort of let them know what the kind of professional behavior I expect my oppressors. I read important safety information to the crowd so they'll be more aware of situationally of what's going on and where they might have an exit and what to do in case they're pepper sprayed or tear gassed or that type of thing. And I don't know.
So it sounds like
It's something that
your job has been to like constantly use humor entertainment as a way of both informing people and de-escalating situations.
I would agree with that assessment. Anecdotally, and people, just a lot of feedback I get. It seems that people really do believe that I really do make a difference in preventing violence in a number of those situations through these methods that I've developed. And I believe they're transferable skills. Also, I've given workshops on the tactics of using the bullhorn and the tactics of de-escalation, and made the material available to people who might want to take that practice up. I certainly do encourage it. Back in the day, there was sort of more peace marshals or peacekeeper type of vibes that did act in some sort of MC type of master of ceremonies type of role, letting people know what's going on and trying to avoid the crowd panic. But yeah, so and once again, all these things that I do, I don't do them a lot. I do them every so often, but when I do, it's a pretty powerful thing, man. It's
So
always
how did
wild,
you transform from a not rabble rouser but rabble calmer to and cop calmer for that matter, cop whisper and rabble calmer, to presidential candidate? First, obviously, more as a satirization of the whole pageantry of the elections, and now it seems to have evolved into something.
It sure has. It sure has. As I had referenced, I had run for mayor of Baltimore, Maryland in '87. And how that played out, I told you I bailed on Baltimore, joined that peace march, started going to demonstrations, going to the rainbow gatherings. And then a year passed and I realized, oh shit, I was supposed to be running for mayor. And so I did a month-long drug study as a human lab rat. and made enough money that I was able to hire some computer typesetter to typeset my platform that I wrote while I was in there, and print up some posters that said, Vermin Supreme is your mayor, demand a recount. And like that, and then went back to Baltimore and actually did run a pretend campaign for a couple days. And so what I started doing was bringing my satirical campaign to the Rainbow and to these various political demonstrations. We used to do a lot of stuff out at the Nevada nuclear test site, a lot of big scale encampments and thousands of people doing civil disobedience out that way. And so I became known as a candidate. And then I started running up in the New Hampshire primary, just showing up and pretending to run in 92, and discovered that because New Hampshire is such a small state, and every candidate goes up there right after the Iowa caucus. Every candidate has campaign headquarters, they have campaign buses, they have campaign staffs, they have campaign rallies, and they're bouncing all around the state all at the same time. So it's very easy to interact with them, interfere with them, ask them stupid questions, and get some publicity. And so that's what I started doing. At that point, I started wearing the boot on the head. That became a thing, and and of course, there's media from around the world. So there's this international media thing going on there at the same time. And so I came across that part of the formula, interacting with the duopoly candidates and getting publicity as a result of it, and having fun and asking them, challenging them to the dueling chainsaw grudge match to the death in the steel cage of doom, and did that every 4 years, and did that for 8 election cycles, approximately about 30, almost 30 years, and developed quite a level of notoriety just by doing that. And of course, that part of it is particularly easy for me. Obviously, it's a particularly easy target, pissing on the duopoly, if you will. And it just seems that it's very enjoyable. I like it. It's improv campaigning because I'm on the street and interacting with the cops and the demonstrators and the other candidates and citizens, and so it's just a lot of fun. It's always different. This year we had ponies. I had Lord Buckethead up there and all of this stuff. And, when I was a younger person, I was easily dismissed. It's like, oh God, look at that hippie. Look at that scraggly hippie guy with the boot on his head, talking crazy shit. So it took a long time before, I became all gray and these awesome lines in my face and stuff that has given me a lot of gravitas that goes along with the levity. And so now I'm like the elder statesman of wingnuts or some shit. Now, as far as also because I've this past year I've been running as a libertarian, and of course a lot of I mean they perceive it to be sort of I mean it let me tell you, it took me many years to be able to accept and say that I'm a libertarian. Back in the day, boy, I bought into every stereotype of libertarians. I badmouthed libertarians.
Because I think our audience is probably very heavily split on the term themselves. And I myself, after spending years calling myself a libertarian, have a level of ambivalence towards it at this point. So what exactly was the process, and what does that come to mean to you?
Well, what is a libertarian? A person who believes in liberty, I guess. Once again, I'm dabbling with the Libertarian Party, or I've joined forces with the Libertarian Party, if you will. And let's see. Yeah, it took me a long time because, if I could just talk a little bit about my transition and my understanding how I
Yeah.
dispelled a lot of these things. The beautiful thing about New Hampshire, and another wonderful thing about New Hampshire, is that it is such a small state, and it does have a very big the Free State Project. I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
Yes, I'm very.
but their idea was to get enough libertarians to move up there where they could have a big sway on the political goings-ons there. And they've had semi-success. They've got a bunch of state reps elected and like that. Um, but I guess 2012 is when a lot came together for me, because I was just starting to become a little more acquainted with the Free State Project and the Free Staters. and it was the Occupy the primary. It was one of the last Occupy actions, and it was the year that I glitter bombed Randall Terry. And
I think that's the first time I heard of you when that happened.
yeah, I mean that was crazy because it went viral and got turned into a meme and went a long way towards making me this larger than life figure. Thank you, bronies. But if you watch the unedited that 5-minute video, somebody clipped off the ending, and it was very lucky for me that they did, because in that ending, I led the audience in a mic chant, in a mic check, and it was like mic check, welcome to the New Hampshire primary. You've been occupied, and I said that to Randall Terry while I was shaking his hand. And but the person who made that edit of that C-SPAN tape left that part off. And so as a result, I wasn't pegged as any particular thing. And it was perceived to be a nonpartisan and event, and that I wasn't, specifically referencing a party or a candidate. So it was understood as a much broader swipe, and as such, was appreciated by the right and the left. And that is essentially what gave me this huge audience that really spans the political spectrum, from the hard right to the hard left, to places that creep me out, quite frankly. But I can't help that. All I can do is address it when it comes to my attention and what have you. And so during that Occupy the primary, at any given event, and we shut down Newt Gingrich's event. I mean, literally, we shut it down. He couldn't even get to his own campaign headquarters because we surrounded it, and we were screwing with Santorum, and it was just so much fun. But in any given event, there would be the occupiers over here, and there were the Free Staters over there, and we were all demonstrating and protesting the same politician, albeit for different reasons, perhaps. And at any moment, the whole thing could transition to everybody would join in and make it a Vermin Supreme rally. So it was very, very funny and very fluid, and definitely, you know, I felt like I was being a uniter, which I always felt like I've tried to be. And my campaign manager that year was a woman named Chris, and she had been in an accident, and she had ended up in a wheelchair, and she was with the Free State Project, and she made me understand that her community came together, and not only did they see her through her immediate plight, they also helped her long term to help her create her own position with the Free State Project, and do the grants and everything to keep her going, gainfully employed as a productive member and all that stuff. And so it was at that point that I really, once again, had to question my preconceptions, my stereotypes of the libertarians, and
What are
had
those
to give them the
stereotypes?
credit, uh, that they were selfish bastards,
Oh, so
selfish,
the Ayn
greedy,
Rand caricature.
selfish, greedy, capitalist bastards. I got mine. Fuck you. I think in that, and I
Right.
used to say, quite frankly, libertarians have no soul. I would quip. But, once again, that was prejudice. I was coming from a place of prejudice, flat out, not knowing real libertarians, or I turns out I did, but I didn't know they were libertarians. And once I started really knowing libertarians and what they stood for, I understood that there was quite a bit in common, in the Venn diagrams, in terms of wanting to end the state. I mean, the Libertarian Party is the only party that welcomes anarchists, for goodness sake. Um, so after, and then in 2016, some libertarians started reaching out to me to do different things, and I was invited to the International Students for Liberty conference in
Yeah, I believe
DC.
I
And
briefly met you there.
oh, okay. And that was great because they gave me no content restrictions. They didn't tell me what to do. They just brought me down to interrupt the president's opening remarks,
Mhm.
and he was in on it. And
At that point, so
that's it. And
never
that's when
forgot.
I did my scorching bullhorn rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, and gave him a lesson on Ponynomics. And then on my way out, I threw a bunch of confetti glitter on them, and told them that Peter Kropotkin told me to turn them into a bunch of social anarchists. Because Kropotkin, obviously, I read that when I was pretty young, in Emma Goldman, and when you read things when you're younger, I think they make a real impression, and that's certainly, they really informed my outlook on things. And then the
Well,
Rainbow Gathering sort of gave me a more practical application. And then running in the streets, of course, when I would see the black bloc or the red and black bloc, inevitably, I would run with them, run interference for them because they are anti-authoritarians, and I knew that they would be confronting the police, state, literally, or committing some sort of a symbolic property destruction. And so, and as a result, I knew there was going to be some excitement, and the kind of excitement that could perhaps use my particular skill set. And I catch a little flack for that from some of the libertarians because oh, Vermin and Antifa and all that. But those were different times. That's before they were punching Nazis, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Mutual Exchange Radio. I just wanted to put a plug in for the center and all the great work my colleagues do there. If you are enjoying this conversation, you can read and listen to more about the theory and practice of market anarchism at c4ss.org. There are years' worth of articles, books, and zines on current events, philosophy, politics, and economics of anarchist theory. There are also books, essay collections, and swag available at the C4SS store at store.c4ss.org that you can check out as well. This show and everything else the Center does would not be possible without our generous donors and patrons. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/c4ss.org. That's patreon.com/c4ssdotORG. I'll have more information about how you can support the show and the rest of the Center's projects on Patreon at the end of this episode, as well as the bonus goodies you get for doing so. But for now, here's the rest of this episode. But I guess another question that I think a lot of people have is, how exactly would you describe your political ideology? Because you say libertarian, and then you cite Kropotkin.
Well,
and a lot of left libertarians.
I tell people that I tend to define myself as a rainbow anarchist. And that's mainly because, once again, I learned everything, a lot of that I know about practical anarchy from the Rainbow Gatherings. And I also have an appreciation for many of the stripes of anarchism. I am an anti-statist. I am an anti-authoritarian. And when I say I'm a libertarian, I generally say that I'm a left anarchist libertarian. Mm-hmm. Because, once again, and that's another one of the stereotypes that I did not understand about the Libertarian Party that took me a long time to grok and understand, was that it is not a right-leaning monolith. Mm-hmm. It is more of it has a spectrum. It has a left and a right spectrum going on there. And, when I just mentioned to, even lefties, when I'm talking to older lefties, it's like, you do know they have a Libertarian Socialist Caucus. Did you know that? And that, like, really? And, just that simple fact that the Libertarian Party has a Libertarian Socialist Caucus, just that alone tends to make people really have to reconsider what they think that the Libertarian Party is. I have found just the fact that I'm, my own campaign is causing people to take a second look at it. And I don't mind, I've got a fair amount of political goodwill and capital, and I certainly, I've taken some hits for my involvement with the Libertarian Party, but I have found so many beautiful people, and they are quite receptive to the concept of mutual aid. They tend to call it volunteerism or whatever, and charity. One of my things going in, I was always afraid to discuss with the Libertarians was, my distaste for their framing of helping other people as charity. Right. When my understanding was much more towards the lines of mutual aid. But I never wanted to mention that to them because I was afraid they would co-opt it. And in the meantime, but here I am trying to sell them on mutual aid and trying to reframe it. So I think, part of this run, I'm finding that I'm trying to recontextualize the culture of the Libertarian Party. We're trying to, and I was recruited into this particular run. In 2016, I did go to the national convention. I did say that I was running, that I was seeking their nomination. But it was, once again, that was the tail end of, that was probably the last of the not real campaign. Me just saying it was because in making it so. Whereas,
well, real quick, what exactly, besides just like entertainment, obviously, which is what I think most like people who aren't familiar with you think all that was accomplishing. Do you think that those fake campaigns were trying to accomplish more in terms of like directing people to the absurd pageantry of electoralism, or would you?
Oh, I certainly think so. I think it has always operated on a lot of different levels. I understand that a lot of different people ascribe different levels of import to it, all the way from Vermin, what you're doing is so critical for democracy, blah blah blah, to that is the stupidest shit I ever seen. And everybody's entitled to their own opinion and their own reality and their own understanding of it. Of course, I have always thought of it as I'm offering my critique of the stinking rotten system, and I think that's why a lot of the platform planks have held up so well. I mean, I was ranting about the mandatory toothbrushing law and the secret dental police and the preventative dental maintenance detention facilities and all of those things long before the Patriot Act was even written. It was sort of my clarion cry. It was my Cassandra cry. It was my, me really putting out my disgust with the system, but trying to not sugarcoat it, but just make it palatable by being satirical and funny. The free pony, the free ponies. Oh, everybody likes a free pony, but it's a federal pony identification system. Oh, whoa, that's that. And I think
We'll take
my
away your guns
communication
and give you
strategy.
better ones was another one.
Yes,
Kinds
I
of
mean free ponies has entered the political vernacular. I mean, you hear
right.
people referring to it as if I didn't make it up. They still.
Yeah, I remember hearing that when I was in because I used to be more neoconish before I became an anarchist, and then long story there. But I remember hearing conservatives saying that, and then I later found out where that came from, and I was thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, I think that's probably one of the most, successful. I mean, I don't know. I guess it was successful if you consider that sort of thing successful. Putting out a meme that fucking becomes the real thing. I guess. But
So
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So a lot of anarchists, one thought they might have is that there's just no point in spending any time in these elections, even in the satirical way you used to. The system's fundamentally broken, direct action gets the goods, what's the point of elections in the first place and all that? So what would you say to them about the worthwhileness of either your old approach or the approach you're taking right now?
Well, I think the old approach was valid. I mean, I was always concerned that, when I started up, I was a little concerned that I would encourage people to vote. But, as I get older, I just give less fucks, sort of. And, I think that, I have helped humiliate and mock the system. I think those are valid ways to bring it down a peg, using humor as a weapon. The fact that I rolled into the New Hampshire primary and throw down my $1,000 and come in third or come in fourth in 2016, came in third in 08, getting, more votes than a lot of the other real candidates, to the point where they have to ask themselves, can they get more votes than Vermin Supreme before getting on the New Hampshire primary ballot? And I can say anecdotally, people tell me that they have been inspired by it. They tell me that I'm creating space. That people say a lot of things, and I think that they're all valid. I mean, yeah, it is. The system is rotten. Politics is rotten, and that's part of my selling point this election year. I'm telling the libertarians, this is your opportunity. I'm not trolling the LP. I'm offering them the opportunity to troll America. And they're all concerned. Well, we're a serious party. Can we put up a joke candidate and not have it backfire, and not people think we're a joke? And it's like, well, other than the right. But I try to explain to them in terms of messaging and framing. All they have to do is say, "Yeah, no, we're the Libertarian Party, serious party. We got serious ideas." However, the pivot's always important. The duopoly electoral presidential system has risen to the level of a joke. So, with love and with spite, here's Vermin Supreme. Fuck you. So that's how I'm framing it. Quite frankly, I mean, these 30 years of satirical campaigning, or whatever you want to identify it as, has given me this level of notoriety, this vast reservoir of goodwill and political capital, and this cast of characters and fan base and all of these things that, and social media base. And, it's essentially, it's a package that I'm offering. I'm making a legitimate offer to the Libertarian Party and the delegates. My campaign staff are, I've got, a couple dozen people that are all principled libertarians who absolutely believe that my candidacy and me being at the top of the ticket is the way to go. I mean, they believe that it's the best way to propel the party forward. Now, there's a shit ton of people who I mean, people who disagree, and a lot of people vehemently disagree and extremely vitriolically and slanderously disagree.
Right,
and that's how I know it's working.
Yeah. Right, and another concern I hear from, because a lot of what you're doing is promoting a sense of bottom unity, so to speak, between left and right libertarians, which,
Yes, anti-authoritarian.
Right, which, at C4SS, a lot of us sort of slot into like the middle bottom. So like we're of course going to be amenable to that sort of political coalition building project. But a lot of people on both sides are obviously skeptical of that long-term goal. And you've addressed some of the concerns that the left has about right libertarians being selfish and all that, and how those are often stereotypes. And we can get into some substantive ideological disagreements for a minute, but a lot of right libertarians who I've heard who are more traditional, centrist not centrist, but minarchisty types tend to view you as like in some ways an entryist or something like that. What would you say to those people?
Entryist in what way?
The socialists those damn Reds are trying to take over the Libertarian Party,
Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Don't tell anybody, though. Well, yeah, I am a left anarchist, but my running mate, Spike Cohen, he is an ANCAP, and that's okay. I got no problem with the anti-authoritarian right. And my main thing that I've been trying to push is compassion and love. And my understanding of as an anarchist has never changed. That the only way they will ever able to disengage ourselves from the state is to do it ourselves and to create the functions that the government purports or that the people need. And we have to do it. We have to make that happen. But on the other hand, in my current incarnation, I'm not above playing the minarchist advocate. It's like, oh, that's your problem? I will use the government for that. Fine, that.
I mean, minarchist society, because like there's obviously always been the perennial debate going back to the 70s and like right libertarian spaces between ANCAPs and minarchists. But even some like more ANCAP-y people have this like, oh, it's the dang Reds taking over, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Libertarian Party is a party of caucuses. I mean, there's a lot of different little caucuses, and some are definitely more one way or the other, let us say. And there's certainly some tension between the two. And because it seems like libertarians love to fight and tear each other up and tear each other down, that inevitably they're going to do that. So, I mean, I guess there is that possibility that my campaign could bring in a number of young people. I mean, I believe that's a legitimate thing that believe that I will be able to do, bring a bunch of young people to the party. And obviously, I mean, when Bernie dropped out of the race, we got a lot of interest in people coming our way from his camp. Same with Tulsi and same with Yang. Quite frankly, we've got a couple of Yang staffers on board. So yes, it is interesting that a lot of people that one would seem to be diametrically opposed, jumping, socialist leaning over to the libertarian leaning. But once again, it's a spectrum. So yes, I suppose their concerns are valid, but I think the way I'm sort of looking at it is we're just trying to balance it out, trying to even it out. I think the paleo strategy and the Libertarian Party's strategy in the past of trying to appeal to more of the right. You
don't want to hear my rant on those people, but
yeah. So essentially, yeah, I think it's more about balancing and yes, bringing in more open-minded individuals who, I mean, libertarians. Are we opposed to universal health care? Not necessarily. We're only against it if it's run by the government. Boom. There it is.
So what about?
So I don't know how to address that particular. All I can say for sure is that yes, my campaign staff is comprised of libertarians from the left and from the right. and they agree that this is the way forward. I can't help how some cranky people feel about it, or some people who are scared of some communists or something. You know, I mean, come on? The Libertarian Party professes that their ideas are so good that they do not even have to sell them. So, I think if you're from the left, or if you're from the right, and you're willing to work within the framework of the Libertarian Party platform, and you fully agree with the non-aggression principle, then you are certainly welcome into my party.
So what about some of the more specific ideological disputes that sometimes arise between the left and right, like about the relative goodness of markets? Obviously, we at C4SS have always advanced a particular set of responses to that question. But, throughout the history of anarchist thought, there's always been this tension about the extent to which markets should be an organizational feature of a stateless society. Where do you see yourself personally falling in that debate?
I'm pretty open to it. I mean, back in the day, I mean, you will find quotes where I'm, and even in not too distant past, where I say I'm anti-capitalist, and that was at the time it was pretty quick, simply because capitalism is hierarchical and blah blah blah. Now I don't care. I don't give a fuck so much. I mean, people have to exchange things. People have to move goods and services back and forth. During my recent rambling podcast, I've just been talking about, the gift, what a perfect time this is for the gift economy to start.
Right.
Start gifting people, start giving away shit. Now's the time. Look around your house. What do you have that's going to bring somebody else joy? Let's start doing that thing. And barter. I mean, what do I care if people want to barter and give things back and forth? All I have to say is, if you don't own the means of production, don't complain about the people who do. Just kidding. I thought that was funny. I'm gonna make that my Facebook post. So, what I have found, or what some of my people tend to agree, is that a lot of it is semantic. A lot of when like, say, when left will talk about capitalism, perhaps they're mainly referring to the corporatocracy and the corporate state and capitalism, and
And not
maybe they
necessarily
wouldn't be opposed to something like a mom and pop capitalism.
Yeah.
So there's that. When it seems when people
Mhm.
throw out these different terms, they really mean different things. To the right, it's like socialism. That's the government giving stuff to you for free. And, that's not what, so it's really people talking past one another,
Mhm.
because they're not understanding the terms that are being used, and they're not willing to agree on what the words mean that they're using. And I think that's a big part of it's a miscommunication between the various belief systems.
Yeah, that's mostly in public discourse in particular, even though there's still like intellectual disagreements among anarchists about what markets can and can't accomplish. Definitely in the public discourse, that's what's going on 90% of the time when people are fighting about capitalism versus socialism.
Yes, I would love to see a post-state society, and I don't think that's something my grandkids might see, if the planet's still a functioning biosystem at that point. And I don't have any kids, so I can have no
I'm more
grandkids anyway.
pessimistic than that. I think that's something my great 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 grandchildren might see.
So, I mean, and so in my mind, a lot of the arguments over the finer points of these disagreements are maybe they're not totally moot, but they're almost irrelevant to our current situation.
Mhm.
And one of the things that has always brought me great joy is that my understanding of how anarchism works, it works great because it works every day. I mean, we are doing anarchist activities anytime that we want to cooperatively operate to make something happen. Oh, I would, bookstore, the food co-ops, whatever, direct action cells, whatever. I mean, that is anarchism, and it exists. Now, I've also come to understand that, pure gray market capitalism also exists in the black market. So,
Right.
that's interesting too.
So your main approach is you just want to have the best strategy for finding cooperative, non-hierarchical means of organizing, and you're interested in a variety of strategies, whether they come from the left or right, in doing.
I am open to all those things, and as far as hierarchies, as long as they're voluntary, I mean, I'm okay with that. And of course, anarchy's never been against leaders. No, leaders rise and fall as they're needed. If a person has a specific skill set that makes them, some can lead the collective to this direction or that direction, and then when the direction is no longer useful, that person is no longer a leader. I mean, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, once again, maybe just the term leader's a turn off, but
So this is a question that can be clarificatory for some. Who would you say are your biggest ideological influences in terms of like authors, not necessarily just actions that you've done? Because I think you've answered that question already.
oh yeah, I think I did. I think it was Kropotkin and Mutual Aid that really made me start thinking about things like that, and then Emma Goldman as a follow up, and of course, then I was reading, just other fiction books like Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trimble, which just like horrified me so hard and really solidified my thoughts against the war, and Catch 22 by Joseph Heller there, which is fucking such a funny book about the horrors of war, and I don't know, I guess like that.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess as we wind up here, what do you want to accomplish the most with this campaign? Some of it is implicit in what you've already said, but
Well, I've sort of, put it in the hands of the people who recruited me, my campaign staff, Desiree and all the crew, because they have a much better understanding of the libertarian workings and the party politics, whereas I do not have that, and I don't really try and follow the gossip or even too much of the business because it doesn't interest me so much. So I don't know. I think we're trying to, the oval. I guess it's arguable that the Ovaltine window is trying to move it a little bit in our direction um, of Ponynomics. I've always been about creating space. Conceptual space. Why don't you have a pony? Why don't Well, yeah, okay. The U.S. can afford all these wars, but they also can afford a fucking pony for you. And where is it? Why ain't you got it? And my May Day, when I used to do the May Day parades and the May Day messages, it was all about, you may be an anarchist and not even know it. I mean, do you believe that you should be able to live your life without the government telling you when and where and how to do everything? Or do you believe that you can make your own decisions that are best for you? Well, you may be an anarchist. Happy May Day, I mean, did you know that today's the International Workers' Holiday? Did your boss tell you that? No, obviously not, because he's a piece of shit. And,
all right.
so
Well,
I'm just writing it. I mean, it's this campaign, this actual campaign where we're actually seeking the nomination and actually have strategic calculations and going to all these freaking debates and debating all these people, all these other candidates, and a little bit of strangeness going on there for sure, but ultimately, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a new exercise for me. It's almost, I don't want to say it's a new character, but it's my new character,
right,
serious vermin.
right.
And they started having these debates where they made novelty headwear prohibitions at several debates. So it's like, okay, you don't want me to wear my boot? Fine, fuck you. I won't wear my boot. We'll see how that goes. But because I'm trying to convince them that the boot may be a magic boot. It has allowed me to communicate my message to millions of people and exponentially put out my message. But it's not attached to my head. It's not I'm not my character. I'm not always on. I'm not always disruptive. Very reasonable man. Very reasonable offer. And they can take it or leave it. And ultimately, it'll be if I don't get the nomination, that makes my life a lot easier. If I become a national fucking nominee, that is fucking huge, huge fucking headaches, huge fucking stress. Total, full on excitement, full tilt, craziness, but also the negatives. And sure, the payoff is fine. I'll sell more books, get more college gigs, which was never a fucking motivation in the early years. But now, why the fuck not?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to wind up with one more question. What are 3 books you'd recommend that the audience read if they want to learn more about your thinking?
Well, of course, you definitely want to read I, Pony, Blueprint for a New America. Now, that is a book that I have written. It's a novella, actually. It's about 100 pages with about 15 different artists. It is a story about a future long after a Vermin Supreme presidency, after everybody has received their pony, after zombie power fuels the nation, and after the secret dental police have set up checkpoints every couple hundred yards or so. It is a warning from the people of the future to you, the people of their past, your present, that Vermin Supreme is a madman and must be stopped.
Is I Pony an intentional reference to iPencil or?
I think it was a nod to iRobot, but
iRobot. Okay. In the libertarian circles, if you made that a joke about iPencil, that would.
Okay.
That would
I will try that one.
Yeah.
So that's a fucking awesome book. Catch-22 is always fucking hilarious. Maybe I haven't read it so long. I should read it again. It's so fucking hilarious. I don't know if it's relevant anymore. I don't read so many books these days. And let's see what else. Go ahead, read Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbull. It's such a fucking powerful, horrifying little book.
All right. Well, Vermin Supreme, thank you for coming on Mutual Exchange Radio. This was a fun conversation.
Well, I want to thank you also. I loved your inauguration coverage of my inauguration a couple Januaries ago. Logan Marie Glitterpalm wrote it, and It was a beautiful piece. And it's always beautiful running in the streets with y'all, and whatever may happen. But I almost feel like I don't have to preach the whole love and compassion and wash your hands and brush your teeth and check in on your neighbors. But let me assure you that there are a lot of libertarians doing a lot of mutual aid as we speak. It's a very very heartening thing to see. I mean, the Ohio libertarians have set up a free lunch program for the kids who ain't getting no lunch, and all these things. So check out the platform, lp.org/platform. Know that the Venn diagram that you'll agree with a chunk of it, and there's some you won't. But if you feel like you can work with it, it is the party that welcomes anarchists, and there is the Libertarian Party Socialist Caucus, if that's the way you lean, and I assume you do if you're watching this podcast.
All right, thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mutual Exchange Radio. I'd like to thank Vermin again for coming on and having such an entertaining discussion. As I mentioned earlier, if you like this show and want to support what we do, you can support us on Patreon. If you decide to do so, you will get special bonus content and swag as the thank you, including free books, buttons, zines, special credit at the end of the show, and special episodes and interviews for Patreons only. If that sounds appealing to you, or if you just want to support these types of projects and conversations, you can go to patreon.com/c4ss.org. That's patreon.com/c4ssdotorg. And here's a special thank you to our current associate producers, Stacey Jamal, Derek W., David Colburn, Acton Rolls, Cecil Dion, Jacob Sykepin, DT, Alex Gakowski, and James Tuttle. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope to see you in the next one.